Right.
That's essentially what healing is. You take it's called, you can transmute that energy that's,
That's
that
what this
trauma, right, that happens to you. The loss of a child to an overdose is, I couldn't even imagine. Like, I'm a mother.
No, it's terrible.
You know?
They don't have a name for when you lose a child.
Right. Like that type of trauma, but to be able to transmute that, to be able to take that and make it a gift, because I know some of the most amazing nonprofit organizations within the field of addiction, all of them lost a family member to an overdose. Almost, the majority of them, like, they are mothers or sisters that got into it, and they give back and they do help, and they're a very important piece to the fight.
Sure.
Now,
is that something you're willing to talk about, your path with addiction a little bit, or how you wound up on that road?
Oh yeah, that's fine. I mean, it was trauma. It was childhood trauma. It was growing up, in a home where the trauma was just passed on. Cycles of abuse and addiction just passed on from generation to generation to generation.
So like narcissistic parent partnered with like a codependent parent.
Yeah.
Something along those lines.
Yeah.
I had a similar dynamic growing up. And we call it what? It's like unconsciousness, right?
Yeah.
They're just on survival mode,
yeah,
basically. And they just kind of reiterated exactly what their parents probably did to them.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why they call it, right? The cycle of abuse, the cycle of trauma.
Right.
And so I guess, so you have trauma, and you had trauma, and then you would self-medicate with like alcohol or drugs or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And we all know how that part goes, right?
Yeah.
What was the ending for you? Like, what was the awakening moment where you're like, enough's enough?
I mean, God just said it was done, I'm the type of person where, like, when I go through extreme pain, like, pain's a huge motivator, and they'll say, when the pain gets great enough, that's like a saying that they say in recovery. I look back on all my pain and all my trauma and everything that I've struggled with, and I know that it all serves such a purpose, right? So when it was time, because I'm a huge, I'm a very spiritual person. I believe in God. I don't believe anything comes from anywhere but God, right? Everything is always done for my highest and greatest good. So in my darkest moments and my most trying times and the times that I walked through, wanting to numb myself or not wanting to be here anymore.
Sure.
When it was time for me to wake up out of that and do God's work, I woke up out of that and God put me in a place to do God's work. I don't know, you know what I'm saying? And that's how I view people in recovery, and that's how I view people who survive trauma, and that's how I view people who come out of whatever dark place that they're in. It's not just about, like, I don't care where the trauma comes from. I don't care how bad it is. I don't care if it was the loss of a child. I don't care if you were abused as a child. Trauma is trauma. And when you come out of that and, you turn that into something great, that's really all that matters.
Sure.
That's why I don't categorize. My brain doesn't work at a level of like categorizing things. I just look at humanity as humanity. And whether people who have trauma or suffer from trauma go through addiction or not, they go through something. You also have to look at addiction as a very broad spectrum. There's not a human on the face of this planet that isn't addicted to something until they become conscious.
I 100% agree.
Right.
Well, I always say that everyone's probably addicted to something. The only variables are what they use and how frequently they use it. A lot of people are escaping somehow, some way.
Right.
Even in the rooms, right? Maybe they're not using a drink or drug anymore, but they're escaping somehow.
Filling voids all day long.
All about the voids, right?
Yeah.
And that's why they say a lot of times the easiest part of the journey is putting down the drink or the drug. Yeah. And then the real work begins then.
Oh, yeah.
With dealing with life on life's terms, how to handle the emotions, how to just put one foot in front of the other, and then build responsibilities on top of one another.
Right.
And it takes a strong base to really get that stuff down, right?
Yeah, and you have to, the real work, the hard work is in the healing.
Absolutely.
That's the hardest things. And I am walking through it myself for so many years. I can see why people run from it.
Of course.
I can see why people run from self-awareness. That's why when we sit here and we think about like why can't people with mental health or maybe narcissism, why can't they heal? Why don't they heal? Why do they choose not to? Do they not have a choice? And I don't really know the answers to those questions. But all I know is that when you walk through some deep healing, I can see why not everybody does it. You know, I get it.
Well, I think a good element would be, like, your mindset towards it is great, where you think everything that is happening for you is for your highest good.
Yeah.
And I think of all the mindsets to have, that's one of the most pragmatic mindsets to have. And a lot of people get caught up and they stumble along the way, getting to that point where, like, oh no, this is terrible, that's terrible, and they whine and complain, and just otherwise put out an energy that is not for their highest good.
Right.
But when you look at it the way you just said it, you can make the best of things, right? And you can look for the, for lack of a better word, the silver lining, right?
Right.
But what other choice would you really have? If you want to be the happiest and healthiest version of yourself, why wouldn't you think of it that way?
Well, and I always wanted to, before I even got on, it's just all a part of the journey. Like I didn't always have this mindset. It took me a lot of deep, dark moments to get this mindset.
It takes a lot of development.
It takes a lot of development to get this mindset. I had to figure out that I am, the creator of my own universe. I had to figure out that you manifest your own reality. I had to figure out that the power was in my thoughts and in my words and in my actions and not anybody else. Because when you're traumatized or you go through deep trauma or long extended periods of trauma like childhood trauma, everything outside of you is what controls you in here, right? Because you have to protect yourself. Because when you were being brought up, the ones who were supposed to shield you and protect you while you were small and vulnerable were the ones that caused the damage. Therefore, everybody else is the problem. You're trained, it's deep. You're trained, to think like that because of what you went through, but when you start to figure out at whatever point in the journey you figure out that like you can take your power back, and it really all just depends on the quality of your thoughts, and you can retrain that, and that how you heal the brain from trauma is through retraining the brain.
Sure.
And how you heal the body from trauma is through retraining the body. Lifestyle changes, holistic changes, health and wellness, working out, not being in fight or flight, taking care of your nervous system is retraining the body and the nervous system. Once you figure all of that out, then you choose your thoughts wisely. And it also, when, you're still surrounded, like for me, I work with people with addiction. I house women who are very, very, very early on the path of healing, like fresh out of detox, fresh from the streets, and they
probably learn a lot. I'm reminded of a lot.
It has made me evolve tremendously, because to be able to reach them and to be able to give them a home where they can feel safe, I had to learn these things. I had to change me, because everything is an extension of myself. Everything that I create is an extension of who I am. So I was pushed, through owning female sober living, to evolve myself so that I could give that back to them, And plus, I just want to be happy. You know what I'm saying? Like, I just want to be a happy person.
Well, you know what Viktor Frankl said about that? He said, happiness cannot be pursued. It must ensue by pursuing a meaningful life. And I could say, yeah, because like happiness is one of the things that can be fleeting if you just chase it. But when you have some meaning in your life and you're doing something like you're doing, helping out other women with the sober homes, that's a big freaking thing, right?
Yeah.
And that's part of your meaning, part of your purpose. And look at all the growth you're getting from being on that. And I think if there's one thing that helps a lot of people, that they all struggle with in the beginning at least, it's just being honest. Self-honesty, and then sharing about what they're really thinking and feeling. Right? And that's part of what the step process is about too. You learn about the defects, you learn about your shortcomings, your patterns. But if you can do that, and you can stick to it, I think you can only stray so far from the path. But when people start straying and then they stray further, it's because they stop being honest and they stopped getting grounded and they just went off in one direction or another. And I think the honesty thing, like they say, a lot of troubles, they'll grow in the dark and then they'll die in the light of exposure. Right? A lot of the secrets, same thing. So as long as they can stick on that honesty path and have some people in their life, an accountability circle, so to speak, you can't get too far. But when you disconnect, right, and you stop being honest, then any number of things can happen from there. And that's also one of the definitions of addiction, right? It's a lack of connection to things that matter oftentimes. And I can see that definition. It makes sense to me.
Yeah. I think that also kind of ties into like sober living homes and what their meaning, actually is in the role that they can play. Because if you think about it on like a regular, like if we take humans and we categorize them as we truly are, which is, we have instincts. We can think of ourselves as like a pack, right? And if you have a sick pack, you're not going to get better.
Right.
Right? So when you have sober living homes, and the reason why I run my house the way that I do, and that, it has pushed me to evolve, was something clicked. I have a very analytical mind. I can look, because of my trauma, right? Because of my trauma, I view everything very quickly on a very wide scale because I was so used to noticing every single thing in my surroundings.
Sure.